In 1962, park rangers assigned to a remote section of the Grand Canyon, specifically a cavern known as Cave 17, began reporting something they were never trained to deal with. It wasn't rock slides. It wasn't aggressive wildlife. It wasn't even the unpredictable weather that can sweep through the canyon without warning. No, they were hearing things, and what they heard would quietly, almost secretly, shut that part of the canyon down forever. For years, Cave 17 had been considered completely stable. It was a known quantity. It had been mapped, patrolled, documented, and revisited hundreds of times without a single incident. Rangers knew its unique acoustics intimately. They understood how sound behaved inside its narrow, winding corridors. Echoes were normal. The way wind whistled through certain passages, creating strange distortions, was expected. It was all part of the job. But in the early months of 1962, something changed. The daily patrol logs started including subtle but unusual language. At first, it didn't raise any alarms at the main office. Supervisors reading the reports saw phrases like delayed echo, audio repetition, and directional confusion. These were just jotted down casually, in the margins or at the end of a day's summary. The higher-ups chalked it up to ranger fatigue, the biting cold of the high desert winter, or maybe just poor radio conditions in a notoriously tricky area for signals that made you sense. But the reports didn't stop. They became more frequent, more detailed, and more unnerving. One ranger noted an experience that was difficult to explain away. After speaking into his radio to check in with base, his entire transmission came back to him several seconds later. This wasn't static. It wasn't interference from another channel. It was his own voice, a clear, perfect playback of his words with his exact tone. But it wasn't coming from his radio. It was coming from deeper inside the cave system. Another patrol, a two-man team, described the distinct sound of footsteps echoing behind them, perfectly matching their pace on the rocky floor. When they sped up, the footsteps sped up. When they slowed down, the footsteps slowed down. Then they stopped abruptly. The rangers froze, listening. Silence. They turned around, flashlights cutting through the darkness. There was no one there. Nothing. Just the cold, ancient stone of the cavern walls. What disturbed them the most was not the sound itself. It was the timing. The voices, the footsteps, the repetitions, they didn't behave like natural echoes. A normal echo bounces back almost immediately, getting fainter with distance. These sounds were different. They seemed to wait. They responded. Sometimes the delay was a few seconds after someone spoke. Sometimes the sounds came from angles that made no physical sense, from solid rock walls where no passage existed. It was as if something was recording and playing back their presence. As the weeks of winter turned into February, the rangers began to change their own procedures unofficially. They started limiting their radio use inside Cave 17. Some reported taking their headsets off entirely, preferring the silence to the unsettling replies. Others admitted, off the record to their colleagues, that they simply avoided speaking aloud at all while inside the cave. The quiet was safer. Then the equipment failures began, and they were strangely consistent. Radios would die at the exact same coordinates. Patrol after patrol. Compasses would spin slowly, as if confused before freezing entirely, pointing in a random direction. The technology they relied on for safety was becoming unreliable, but only in this one specific location. Several rangers reported hearing low, indistinct murmurs even when their radios were switched off and their headsets were stored in their packs. It sounded like a conversation happening in another room, just too quiet to make out the words. One report filed by a seasoned veteran, contains a chilling detail. He describes stopping mid-patrol, frozen in place, because he believed someone had whispered his name directly into his ear from just behind him. His body cam footage, a new technology at the time, captured the moment. You can see him whip around, his lights scanning the empty passage. The audio on the camera recorded only his own heavy breathing and the faint drip of water. But the ranger insisted, writing it in his official report, that the voice was as real as his own. But perhaps the most unsettling detail came from a senior ranger, a man who had worked in the canyon for over 2 decades. In a private memo to his supervisor, he wrote that the cave no longer sounded empty. He described the feeling, the atmosphere, as occupied, not by people, not by animals. He wrote that it felt like the cave itself was aware of their presence. It wasn't long before these experiences spilled beyond the Park Service. Hikers and spelunkers exploring the areas near Cave 17 began reporting similar phenomena. People heard voices calling out from within the canyon walls. Sometimes they sounded like a friend or family member who wasn't even there. The truly terrifying part was what happened next. When the hikers, confused, would call back, the voices would respond. They would engage in a brief, nonsensical conversation before fading away. That was the moment the Park Service could no longer ignore what its rangers were hearing. This wasn't just tired rangers or faulty equipment anymore. This was a public safety issue. Internal discussions at the highest levels of the National Park Service escalated quickly. Patrol frequency into Cave 17 was drastically reduced. All radio use within a 1-mile radius was officially restricted, and within a few short weeks, a decision was made that would effectively erase Cave 17 from public access and memory. The shutdown came quietly. There were no press releases, no public announcements or warnings, no sensational headlines. Officially, the cave was closed due to geological instability and the risk of collapse. New maps were printed that simply omitted the cave's entrance. Trails leading to it were rerouted or allowed to become overgrown. For all intents and purposes, Cave 17 ceased to exist. But the rangers who were there, the ones who wrote those reports and heard those voices, they knew the truth. The cave wasn't collapsing. It was listening. And what they were hearing in the winter of 1962, they feared, was only the beginning. The canyon holds many secrets, but the silence surrounding Cave 17 might be the most profound one of all. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as unsettling as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown.